What if a simple visit to a bookstore led to the discovery of a truth buried by time? Elizabeth Cambpell, a renowned architect, walked into a small bookstore, seeking solace in the pages of a book. But what she found there would change her life forever. A rare book, a photograph, and a clerk with a familiar smile. The city buzzed with life, its streets a labyrinth of noise and motion. Skyscrapers stretched toward the heavens, their glass facades reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. Elizabeth Campbell stood on the sidewalk, her sharp eyes scanning the bustling crowd. She had returned to the city after 2 decades, a place she had avoided for years. The memories here were too painful, too raw. But something had drawn her back, a feeling she couldn't shake, as if the city itself was calling her home. Elizabeth was a woman of precision and control, a renowned architect whose designs had reshaped skylines across the globe. Her success was undeniable, her name synonymous with innovation and elegance. But beneath the polished exterior lay a wound that had never healed. 20 years ago, in the chaos of a crowded train station, her daughter Lily had vanished. One moment, the 5-year-old was holding her hand, clutching her favorite book, a rare edition of The Secret Garden, and the next, she was gone. The station had been a whirlwind of people, and in the blink of an eye, Lily had disappeared, leaving Elizabeth with nothing but unanswered questions and a heart shattered into a million pieces. Despite her wealth and influence, Elizabeth had never been able to find her daughter. Private investigators, rewards, and endless searches had all led to dead ends. Over time, she had learned to live with the pain, burying it beneath layers of work and public appearances. But the ache never left her. Every child she saw, every laugh she heard, reminded her of the daughter she had lost. Now, standing in the heart of the city, Elizabeth felt a strange pull, as if the universe was guiding her toward something or someone. She had spent the day wandering aimlessly, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, she found herself drawn to a small, unassuming bookstore tucked between a cafe and a florist. The sign above the door read "Whispering Pages," and the warm glow from within beckoned her inside. The bell above the door chimed softly as Elizabeth stepped into the bookstore. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and ink, a comforting aroma that immediately put her at ease. The shop was cozy, with wooden shelves crammed full of books and soft, golden light spilling from vintage lamps. A few customers browsed the aisles, their voices hushed as if in reverence to the stories surrounding them. Elizabeth wandered through the store, her fingers brushing against the spines of the books. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but something about this place felt familiar, like a memory she couldn't quite grasp. As she turned a corner, her eyes landed on a young woman behind the counter. She was in her early 20s, with soft brown hair tied back in a loose braid. Her uniform was simple, a white blouse and a brown apron, but there was something about her that caught Elizabeth's attention. The way she moved, the way she smiled at a customer, it all felt familiar. The young woman looked up, her eyes meeting Elizabeth's for a brief moment. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, a warmth, a kindness, that made Elizabeth's breath catch in her throat. She quickly looked away, pretending to examine a nearby shelf, but her heart was racing. Why did this stranger feel so known? As Elizabeth browsed, her eyes fell on a book displayed prominently on a table. It was a rare edition of The Secret Garden, its cover worn but still beautiful. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the same edition Lily had been holding that day at the train station. Elizabeth reached out, her fingers trembling as she picked up the book. The memories came flooding back. Lily's laughter, her tiny hands clutching the book, the way she had begged Elizabeth to read it to her one more time. "That's one of my favorites," a soft voice said. Elizabeth turned to see the young woman from the counter standing beside her. She was holding a stack of books, her expression warm and friendly. "It's a beautiful edition," Elizabeth replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Do you have many rare books here?" The young woman smiled. "A few. This one's special to me, though. I've had it since I was a kid." Elizabeth's heart pounded in her chest. "Since you were a kid?" The young woman nodded. Yeah, I grew up in foster care, so I don't have much from my childhood. But this book, it's always been with me. My foster mom said it was a gift from my birth mother. Elizabeth's world seemed to tilt. The book, the young woman's smile, the way she moved, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Could it be possible? Could this young woman, with her kind eyes and her rare book, be the daughter she had lost so many years ago? As the young woman walked away to help another customer, Elizabeth reached into her purse, her hands trembling. She pulled out a photograph she had carried for years. It was worn and slightly faded, but the image was still clear. Elizabeth and Lily, sitting in a garden, Lily holding the very same book. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the photo, then at the young woman across the room. Her heart raced as she realized this wasn't just a coincidence. This was fate, and she wasn't going to let it slip away again. Elizabeth stood frozen, the photograph clutched tightly in her hand. Her eyes darted between the image of her daughter, Lily, holding the rare edition of The Secret Garden, and the young woman behind the counter, who was now helping another customer. The resemblance was uncanny. The same soft brown eyes, the same gentle smile. Elizabeth's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the question that had haunted her for 20 years. Could this be her? Could this be Lily? She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She couldn't let this moment slip away. Not again. Not when she was so close to finding the truth. With trembling hands, she tucked the photograph back into her purse and approached the counter, the rare book still in her grasp. The young woman looked up as Elizabeth approached, her smile warm and welcoming. "Did you want to purchase that?" she asked, gesturing to the book in Elizabeth's hands. Elizabeth nodded, though her mind was far from the transaction. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She placed the book on the counter, her eyes never leaving the young woman's face. "You said this book is special to you. May I ask why?" The young woman's expression softened, a hint of nostalgia in her eyes. "It's one of the few things I have from my childhood," she said. "I don't remember much about my birth parents, but my foster mom told me this book was a gift from my mother. It's been with me ever since." Elizabeth's breath hitched. The pieces were falling into place, but she needed to be sure. She reached into her purse again and pulled out the photograph, her hands shaking as she placed it on the counter. "Do you recognize this?" she asked, her voice trembling. The young woman's brow furrowed as she picked up the photograph. Her eyes scanned the image, taking in the sight of the little girl holding the same book she had just been discussing. Her fingers brushed against the book in the photo, then drifted to the locket around her neck, a small, delicate piece of jewelry she had worn for as long as she could remember. This little girl looks just like me when I was young," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. She looked up at Elizabeth, her eyes wide with confusion and hope. How do you have this?" Elizabeth's heart ached as she looked into the young woman's eyes that were so familiar, so much like Lily's. "Because that little girl is you," she said, her voice breaking. "You're my daughter. You're Lily." The young woman, Anna, as she had introduced herself earlier, stared at Elizabeth, her mind racing. "No, that can't be," she said, shaking her head. "My name is Anna. I don't have a family. I grew up in foster care. My birth parents, they abandoned me." Elizabeth reached out, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and heartbreak. "Anna was your nickname. I called you that all the time when you were little. You loved it." She paused, her eyes pleading. "I never abandoned you, Lily. You were taken from me. I've spent my entire life looking for you." Anna's hand flew to her mouth, her breath hitching as tears welled up in her eyes. She looked down at the photograph again, then at the book on the counter. The pieces of her past were coming together, but it was all too much to process. "I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice trembling. Elizabeth slid the photograph closer to Anna, her own tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to say anything," she said softly. "Just let me hold you, please." Anna hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had spent her entire life believing she was unwanted, that her birth parents had left her behind. But now, this woman, this stranger who felt so familiar, was telling her that she had been loved, that she had been searched for, that she had been missed. It was overwhelming, but deep down, a part of her wanted to believe it. Slowly, she stepped out from behind the counter, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Elizabeth opened her arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Anna stepped into her embrace. The moment their arms wrapped around each other, it was as if the world stood still. Elizabeth held her daughter, and Anna felt the warmth of a mother's love. "Mom," Anna whispered, her voice trembling as she buried her face in Elizabeth's shoulder. "Yes, my darling," Elizabeth replied, her tears falling freely. "It's me, and I'm never letting you go again." The bookstore had long since closed, its warm lights dimmed and the streets outside quiet under the blanket of night. Elizabeth and Anna sat in a small reading nook at the back of the shop, surrounded by towering shelves of books. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and the weight of unspoken emotions. Between them sat the rare edition of The Secret Garden and the photograph that had changed everything. Anna clutched the book in her hands, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the cover. She had carried it with her for as long as she could remember, but now it felt different, heavier, more significant. She looked up at Elizabeth, her eyes searching for answers. "Tell me everything," she said softly. "I need to know what happened. Why was I taken from you?" Elizabeth took a deep breath, her heart aching as she prepared to revisit the most painful chapter of her life. "It was 20 years ago," she began, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. "We were at the train station. You were holding this book and I was holding your hand. It was so crowded, and I turned away for just a moment to check the departure board. When I looked back, you were gone." Anna's brow furrowed as she tried to recall the memory. "I think I remember the station," she said hesitantly. "There were so many people and it was loud. I remember feeling scared. But then, it's all a blur after that." Elizabeth nodded, her eyes filled with regret. "I searched for you everywhere. I called your name, I begged for help, but it was chaos. The police came and they started an investigation, but there were no leads. It was like you had vanished into thin air." Anna's chest tightened as she listened. She had always believed she had been abandoned, but now the truth was far more complicated. "What happened after that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never stopped looking for you," Elizabeth said, her voice breaking. "I hired private investigators, I offered rewards, I followed every possible lead. But as the years went by, it became harder to hold on to hope. I tried to move on, to focus on my work, but every day, I wondered where you were, if you were safe, if you were happy." Anna's eyes filled with tears as she absorbed Elizabeth's words. She had spent her life feeling like she didn't belong, like she was a burden to the foster families who took her in. But now, she was learning that her mother had never given up on her, that she had been loved and missed every single day. "I grew up thinking I was unwanted," Anna admitted, her voice trembling. "The foster system wasn't kind to me. I moved from home to home, never staying in one place for too long. I learned early on not to expect much from anyone. I got my first job as a waitress when I was 16, and I've been working ever since, just trying to survive." Elizabeth's heart shattered as she listened to Anna's story. She reached across the table, gently taking Anna's hand in hers. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "If I had known, if I had found you sooner, none of this would have happened. You would have had the life you deserved." Anna looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, protecting herself from the pain of rejection. But now those walls were beginning to crumble. "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "After all these years, why did we find each other now?" Elizabeth smiled through her tears. "Because of this," she said, gently touching the book in Anna's hands. "It's the one thing that tied us together, even when we were apart. It's what brought me here today." Anna's grip on the book tightened as she absorbed Elizabeth's words. She felt a sense of connection, of belonging. But there was still one question burning in her mind. "What about my dad?" she asked hesitantly. "Where is he?" Elizabeth's expression darkened with sorrow. "Your father passed away a few years after we lost you," she said softly. "He couldn't handle the grief. He blamed himself for not protecting you that day." Anna's breath hitched as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I wish I could have met him," she whispered. Elizabeth nodded, her own tears falling freely. "He would have loved you so much, Lily. You were his whole world, just like you were mine." Anna reached across the table, her hand trembling as she placed it over Elizabeth's. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted, "but I think I want to try. I want to know what it's like to have a mom." Elizabeth's heart swelled with hope as she squeezed Anna's hand. "And I want to know what it's like to be your mom again," she said. "Let me make up for the years we lost, Lily. Let me give you everything I couldn't before." The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Elizabeth's penthouse, casting a warm glow over the spacious living room. Anna stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass, staring out at the city skyline. The view was breathtaking: towering skyscrapers, bustling streets, and the distant shimmer of the river. But despite the beauty, Anna felt out of place. The luxury surrounding her was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the modest life she had known. Elizabeth approached quietly, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. She handed one to Anna, who accepted it with a small, hesitant smile. "How are you feeling?" Elizabeth asked, her voice gentle. Anna sighed, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I don't know," she admitted. "This is all so different. I'm not used to being cared for like this. I've spent so long taking care of myself that it feels strange to let someone else do it." Elizabeth's heart ached at Anna's words. She placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her touch soft but reassuring. "You don't have to do it alone anymore," she said. "You're not alone, Lily. You never will be again." Anna turned to face Elizabeth, her eyes searching for reassurance. "I want to believe that," she said quietly. "But it's hard. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. And now, this place, this life, it doesn't feel like mine yet." Elizabeth nodded, understanding the weight of Anna's words. "It will," she said firmly. "It will take time, but this is your home now, and I'm here to help you every step of the way." Over the next few days, Elizabeth and Anna began to settle into their new life together. Elizabeth showed Anna around the penthouse, pointing out the little details she had always imagined her daughter would love. The cozy reading nook by the window, the garden on the terrace filled with roses, the art studio that had remained untouched for years, waiting for Lily's return. One afternoon, Elizabeth brought out an old photo album, its pages yellowed with age. They sat together on the couch, flipping through the memories of Anna's early childhood. Elizabeth pointed to a picture of a little girl in a bright yellow sundress, her hair tied with a ribbon. "This was your favorite dress," Elizabeth said, her voice filled with nostalgia. "You wore it every chance you got." Anna smiled faintly as she studied the photo. "I think I remember that," she said. "I remember you brushing my hair and singing to me." Elizabeth's heart swelled with emotion. "And I'll do it again if you'll let me," she said with a soft laugh. But not everything was easy. Anna struggled to adjust to the idea of wealth and luxury. She had spent her life working hard just to get by, and the sudden shift in her circumstances left her feeling uneasy. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, Anna turned to Elizabeth, her expression troubled. "I'm not used to this," she admitted. "I've spent so long taking care of myself that it feels strange to let someone else do it. I don't want to be a burden." Elizabeth took Anna's hand, her grip firm but gentle. "You're not a burden," she said. "You're my daughter, and I want to take care of you. You've spent your whole life carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Let me help you now." Anna's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Elizabeth. "I don't know how to let go," she whispered. Elizabeth smiled, her own eyes glistening with tears. "You don't have to do it all at once," she said. We'll take it one step at a time. Together. As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth and Anna began to rebuild their relationship. They shared stories, laughter, and even tears as they pieced together the puzzle of their lives. Elizabeth introduced Anna to her world, her friends, her colleagues, the charities she supported. Anna, in turn, shared her own experiences, her dreams, and her fears. One evening, as they sat by the fountain in the garden, Anna turned to Elizabeth, her expression thoughtful. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "why didn't you give up on me? Most people would have." Elizabeth's heart swelled with love as she looked at her daughter. "Because a mother's love doesn't give up," she said. "It doesn't fade, and it doesn't forget. I knew deep in my soul that you were out there somewhere. And now that I've found you, I'll never let you go again." Anna leaned into Elizabeth's embrace, her heart full. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up on me." Elizabeth kissed Anna's forehead, her tears falling freely. "You're my miracle, Lily," she said, "my second chance. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you're loved." As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth and Anna continued to rebuild their relationship. They spent hours together, exploring the city, visiting museums, and sharing meals at cozy cafes. Elizabeth introduced Anna to her world, her friends, her colleagues, the charities she supported. Anna, in turn, shared her own experiences, her dreams, and her fears. Slowly but surely, they began to heal the wounds of their fractured past. One afternoon, Elizabeth took Anna to the train station where she had disappeared all those years ago. It was a difficult journey, but Elizabeth felt it was necessary. They stood together on the platform, the bustling crowd a stark contrast to the quiet intimacy of their bond. "This is where it happened," Elizabeth said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "This is where I lost you." Anna looked around, her heart heavy with emotion. She had no memory of that day, but she could feel the weight of it in the air. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything you went through." Elizabeth shook her head, her eyes filled with love. "You have nothing to be sorry for," she said. "What happened wasn't your fault. And now we have a chance to move forward, together." As they left the station, hand in hand, Anna felt a sense of closure she hadn't known she needed. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had a family now, a mother who loved her, and a future filled with hope. That evening, as they sat together in the garden, Anna turned to Elizabeth, her heart full. "Mom," she said, her voice steady, "I want to know more about my dad. Will you tell me about him?" Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Of course," she said. "Your father was a wonderful man. He loved you so much, Lily. You were his whole world." As Elizabeth shared stories of Anna's father, Anna felt a connection to the man she had never known. She could see the love in Elizabeth's eyes as she spoke, and it filled her with a sense of peace. The sun set behind them, casting a warm glow over the garden as Elizabeth and Anna sat together, their hearts finally beginning to heal. The years they had lost would never come back, but the future was theirs to create. A future filled with love, hope, and the bond that nothing could ever break. Love can heal even the deepest wounds. What would you do if you discovered a long-lost family member? Comment below. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, share it with someone you like, and subscribe to Embrace the Journey for more heartwarming stories.